session as well. All right, feel free to unmute or put questions in the chat. And Liz, I can't really see the chat well, so if you see a question, just thank you. All right, I am Shino. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Pardon me. I'm on the board of the ECC, and I have been a longtime public school advocate, and I've spent a lot of time working on capital plans, so I'm happy to share what I know about the capital plan process. Let's start with what is a capital plan. And before we talk about the capital plan, we're going to start with what are capital projects. So capital projects are defined by the City of New York. These are projects that have to cost more than $50,000. That's sort of arbitrary, but that's what the city decided. They must be a physical, tangible project. In other words, brick and mortar project. That means you cannot, a program is not a capital project because you cannot touch a program. Technology can be eligible, but not always. Like a single computer is not a capital project because a single computer does not cost $50,000. But if you're ordering a classroom set of iBooks or MacBooks, then it can be an eligible capital project. It is not for hiring people or running a program. Again, running program is an expense funding, not a capital funding. And hiring people, while you're paying for a person's salaries and a person is physical and tangible, it is not a capital expense, a capital program funding. And these projects must have a useful life of 5 years or more. So these are the basic criteria for what is considered a capital project. It's not a clear cut, and we'll be talking about some of that. Some projects that are physical improvements and tangible may or may not be a capital eligible project. But these are the city's definition of what is considered a capital project. So then the capital plan is a plan that compiles these improvements to school buildings and put it in the 5-year horizon. So it's a plan that is prepared by the New York City Department of Education and the School Construction Authority. It is, actually, before we go there, I want to just do a basic review of what the city considered a fiscal year. City's fiscal year starts on July 1st and ends on June 30th. And the nomenclature is FY 2024 means the fiscal year that starts on July 1st, 2023 and ends on June 30th, 2024. So it's always the ending year. That's the fiscal year. It's a little bit confusing, but just remember FY24 means that fiscal year that ends in 2024. Okay. And the School Construction Authority just released the new capital plan for the next 5 years. So that's 2025 through 2029. So we are still in the current 5-year plan that ends at the end of fiscal year 2024. So the current 5-year plan goes through June 30th, 2024. Oops, sorry. Even though the capital plan is a 5-year plan, there is an annual review process, and the plan may be amended every year. So even though it's a 5-year plan, we actually do the review and amendment yearly. And all these documents are available from the New York City School Construction Authority website, and that is the URL. We'll be sharing this PowerPoint so you don't have to copy anything down. The capital plan has 3 major sections. The most easiest to understand is the capital improvements in the middle there. These are the enhancements, upgrades, and repairs. You need a new auditorium, you need a new library, or you need to refurbish the gym floor, or you need an upgrade in playground. Those are all capital improvements, and those projects are included in the capital plan. But in addition to those, what you would consider home improvements, quote unquote, there are 2 other components or sections. One is the capacity. That means school seats. How many schools do we need? How many seats do we need? That means whether creating new classrooms in existing buildings or building new school buildings, or identifying spaces where you can actually lease and create a school. So those capacity projects is a big part of the capital plan. So we talk about new capacity, that's really talking about building new schools. We also talk about early childhood education spaces. Again, this is not programs, but these are spaces to run these early childhood education programs. And for those programs that are run by the DOE, not the community-based organization, the SCA is responsible for finding spaces for them. Class size reduction is a big part of the capacity because if you don't have enough classrooms, you can't reduce class size. So there are sections of the capacity part of the capital plan that specifically addresses class size reduction. And this becomes even more important now that with the class size reduction law. Removing temporary classroom units has been a big initiative for the last 6 years or so when the city committed to removing them. These are temporary classrooms, even though some of them have been there for decades. But these units take space away from physical education spaces or schoolyards or spaces that are otherwise meant for other uses rather than putting temporary classrooms. And these are essentially trailers and not really fit to be classrooms in a permanent basis. So the city committed to removing them. But that means those schools with the temporary units will need to either cap enrollment or build a new annex or go through rezoning or otherwise adjust the capacity of the schools. Facility replacement is usually for schools that are in a leased building and they lose that lease and they need to be relocated. So that's where this comes in. And then there are a whole bunch of mandated programs. These are the legally required capital improvement projects. Lighting fixture was one of them. The fluorescent light bulb ballasts contain mercury. So about 10 years ago, a law was passed to remove these ballasts with mercury containing fixtures. So that's still an ongoing process. Asbestos abatement, because we still have some schools with old asbestos tiles. So when they are getting peeled up or peeling off or cracked, we need to make sure they are removed in a safe way. And that's also a legal requirement. And building code compliance, naturally, these are mandated things that the school construction authority have to do. The most important part of the capital plan, though, I would say, is the appendices. So the capital plan has this, really fancy 40 or so pages of text with pictures and dollar amounts and great stuff in it. But where rubber hits the road is the appendices. So when you get the capital plan, make sure to look through the back of the book and go through the appendices. There are district and school-specific information that are included in the appendices, and that's where all the details are. And a quick note, if you see D75, 78, or any reference of District 78 in that section of the appendices, that means high schools. There is no District 78 in the city, but they use 78 to indicate high school buildings in the capital plan, followed by the initial of the borough. So if you see 78K, that means a high school in Brooklyn. Okay, the overall process for the annual amendment or the 5-year plan is in November, the School Construction Authority releases the new 5-year plan or the annual amendment to that 5-year plan. And then November and December, CECs and citywide councils should be doing outreach to schools for capital improvement project requests. Schools should be submitting what they would like to see done to their school buildings through the CEC process. And then December and January, CECs and citywide councils should invite the School Construction Authority to make a presentation about the capital plan, whether it's the new capital plan or the amendment to the existing capital plan. In January, CECs and citywides are expected to prepare a comment letter and rank the requests that they receive from the schools. The SCA does ask that councils to rank the top 5 projects that they received from their schools and submit them. And then in February, the plan is revised. Sometimes it means Very little change from the November version. Sometimes between November and February, funding is added or funding can be decreased. So definitely take a look at the February version of the plan as well. And then in April, the panel for educational policy votes on the capital plan. And it's usually a yes vote because, you know, the mayor has the majority on the PEP. And then June, the city council votes on the capital plan because it is part of the city budget, so the council has to vote on it. The annual plan comparison and the 5-year plans, now we are into the new five-year plan, so it's a new phase of this capital planning process. For the current plan that ends in June 2024, the February 2022 amendment and the February 2023 amendment actually saw a decrease in funding. It went from $9.84 billion for capacity. Remember, that's new schools construction, right? It went from $9.84 billion down to $7.95 billion. This in the face of the class size reduction law being passed by the state. I'm not quite sure what the rationale was for this. Like, you have to reduce class size and you're going to reduce the school construction funding. Well, I hope you can stick around for the 7 p.m. class size reduction law meeting hosted by Class Size Matters. And then there's the capital investment. These are the major upgrades and major repairs and capital enhancements. That section actually saw an increase between the 2 years of amendment process. And then mandated programs saw a little decrease, but in the end, the total capital plan for the 2020-2024 plan over 2 years of amendment process, the funding decreased to 19.4 from 20.6. Now, comparing the February 2023 plan to the new 5-year plan that just came out, this is what we're looking at. $17.0 billion compared to $19.4 billion for the latest version of the current plan. So we are seeing a $2.4 billion reduction in the overall capital plan funding. And the biggest reduction is in capacity. So as the city is required to meet the class size reduction mandate, the city is putting fewer dollars into building new schools and creating more capacity to meet the class size reduction. Doesn't make sense to me, but this is definitely a point of advocacy. Okay, so let's talk about capital improvements. That's the upgrades and enhancements and all those. And we're gonna do a quick quiz here. And here we go. Which of the following are not capital projects? Keep them coming. Okay, I've got a couple more people. I'm gonna go 5 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to end and share the results. The correct answer is the arts program. A new cafeteria is most definitely a capital project because you cannot put a new cafeteria in under $50,000. Rooftop greenhouse is also a capital project because it's pretty impossible to put a rooftop anything under $50,000. So the correct answer is the arts program. That is not a capital program, right? Because we talked about program not being capital projects. Good going, folks. Okay, so a couple more things. Capital or expense? Replacing all windows. That's a capital. Repair a broken window. It's not a capital project because it should not cost $50,000. New curtain in auditorium. Very likely no, because it's not going to hit the $50,000 threshold. But if you're lumping it with a couple other things that are stage curtain kind of related, like replacing the whole curtain railing kind of thing, you may hit that $50,000 threshold and it becomes a capital project. But if it's just simply replacing the curtain, very likely not. New furniture, surprisingly, furniture is not capital eligible. Even if you order $50,000 worth of furniture, it's not considered capital, presumably because you can move them around. But it doesn't really make sense to me. You can't have a room without furniture, but just good to remember that furniture is not. Classroom reconfiguration depends. If you're just putting up one sheetrock wall or taking down one sheetrock wall, it probably doesn't hit, it probably doesn't hit that $50,000 mark. Can you see the poll still on the screen? Stop sharing. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. But if you are drastically changing the classroom configuration, then it could be a capital. Again, you have to remember the $50,000 threshold. So how are projects selected? Building Conditions Assessment Survey, also known as BCAS. That is an annual survey conducted by engineers and architects hired by the School Construction Authority with the principal. It's a very thorough walkthrough of the school building, looking at architectural elements of the building. And I'm not talking about the beauty part of it. It's the floors, ceilings, walls, that kind of physical structure of the building, as well as electrical and mechanical pieces of the building. And the engineers and architects actually evaluate these elements in the building and assess the condition. And the building conditions are then rated by priority 1 through 5. And some of the highest priority conditions then are put into the capital plan for improvements. And these surveys that are annually conducted can be found on the New York City DOE website for your school. You go to your school's website on the schools.nyc.gov, go to data and reports, and look under facilities, and you can look them up. And this is what that looks like if you go to that page. There are 3 separate sections to the report: architectural, electrical, and mechanical. And they look something like this. There are pictures of the particular area. This is a violations. Oh, it's actually not violations, but vault and bunkers. Interesting. I guess it's probably in the basement. And they talk about the condition. This one is rated 5, which is poor, right? And then if you go to urgency of action, I'm sorry, I didn't circle that one, then it says priority 5. So there are all these rankings that I think we can do a separate workshop on this particular BCAS alone, which I think Camille would do someday, I hope. But this is an important document to know that they exist, because this is how things make it into the capital plan. The pieces of the conditions, some of the conditions that are the most urgent are the ones that make it into the capital plan. So where do you find these projects? Again, go to the appendices, go through the borough summary. Under borough summary, there's a school-based program. Under school-based program, there's the school-based reports, and that's where you see all the things listed. This is where the appendices are. And if you go to Borough of Manhattan, right there, you see the borough summary, capacity project, school-based program. And then you look at the school-based program of that appendix, you will see something like this. This is in District 1. School is PS 64. And this school is getting a state of good repair, system replacement, cafeteria, multi-purpose room upgrade for $648,000. Now, if you look at the BCAS for this school, supposedly these are the elements that are flagged as urgent. And then there are other projects listed. And this is what you really need to look into to understand what each of your liaison schools is receiving in terms of capital upgrades. So how do we, beyond the building conditions assessment survey, how do we advance some capital improvement projects and requests? If you are on the PTA or PA and or the school leadership teams, definitely survey the school building for any repairs or capital improvement needs that you can think of. Your bathroom might be really, really old and needs an upgrade, or your cafeteria is really old and not very good that might need an upgrade. So those are the projects you should keep an eye out for. And then review the sections of the capital plan for your school to see if there's anything listed for your school. Seek input from your school community at large as well. Don't just rely on the SLTs and PTA exec board, because sometimes parents have good ideas. There might be a parent who's working with a science teacher to create a school garden, and they might need a garden space on your yard. And that could be actually $50,000 or more. It might be capital eligible. So definitely consult with your school community to see what the capital enhancement ideas might be, as well as improvement. And then make sure that your principal replies to the capital project request from the community education councils and citywide councils. CECs and citywide councils need to know what every school needs in terms of capital improvements. If you are on the CEC, and I think most of you are on the CEC currently, this is the quick timeline. So analyzing capacity projects against needs, that's something you should be doing all year, right? Conducting school visits, also, you're supposed to be doing that throughout the year, not just during the capital process. But then November, you should be hosting the School Construction Authority presentation at either a calendar meeting or a committee meeting so that they can present to you what is new for the capital plan in your district or relevant to your council if you're on the citywide. Then November also, you should be reviewing the sections of the capital plan for your district or for sections that are relevant to your council if you're citywide. Then November through January, you should be reaching out to your community, your parents, educators, administrators, community boards, and certainly your school liaisons to solicit input from the school community on capital improvement projects. And then you have to prepare a ranked list to submit to the School Construction Authority. And then you can also prepare a comment letter, even though a comment letter is not required. I think it's always a good idea to include some kind of a narrative letter talking about the general needs of your district. And in Community Education Council District 2, when I was on it, we included a comment letter generally commenting on the need for ADA accessibility in our buildings. And that's something that I think we need to remind the School Construction Authority about. So review projects, just a couple quick overview of how we used to do this process in District 2, and your council might do it differently, but here's just one way. We review projects that are included in the capital plan for each school so that we understand what's being proposed in the plan. And then we reach out to principals and PTA leaders and your liaison schools and ask for their ideas and their needs for capital improvements, because they know best what their school buildings need. We impose a deadline, because if you don't give them a deadline, then they will not get you anything. So usually it's an early January deadline, but if we get it done early, then we can ask them to submit their requests before the holiday break in December. And then as the council, you have to rank the requests that come in. We think all members should really participate in this process. It shouldn't just be the capital planning committee, if you have a committee, or the president of the council. It really should be all the members participating. How you rank should be up to your council. You should have a discussion on what your priorities are as a council and how you rank the project. And then you submit ranked capital improvement requests to the School Construction Authority sometime in January. They ask you to, They ask you to rank the top 5, but definitely submit all the requests ranked even beyond the top 5, just so that the school construction authority has a record of the needs of your district. Be sure to reach out to District 75 principals and PTA leaders if you are not a CC District 75. And if you have a District 75 rep on your CEC, then definitely work with that representative to get the needs of your District 75 programs within your district. Okay. And then reach out to citywide councils if you're a CEC, just to get their input. And if you have a building that has a high school co-located, then you should be reaching out to citywide council on high schools. And these are just comments for the CEC folks. And capital requests are made for the building, not just your school. So there are 3 schools in your building, and your principal says she wants a new gym. Then that principal should be communicating with the other principals regarding what is needed in the building, especially for shared space, right? If one principal says, yeah, go ahead.
Don't they all have to sign off on it?
Capital requests, no. Principal's annual school survey, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is where communication amongst the principals becomes important, because if one principal of a co-located school says, I want a new gym, and another principal says, I want new bathrooms, then that could be a problem. They should really coordinate requests as the building. Okay, so there are multiple sources of funding for capital improvements. So we talked about the capital plan, which is funded by the City of New York, and the plan is developed by the School Construction Authority. And December, January is when we solicit projects from schools. In addition to that process, there is a City Council member Rizzo A funding. It usually becomes available early in the calendar year, and it's a process by which principals submit an application. The application can look differently depending on the council member. Some council members do an online application form. Some council members just request the principal to submit a letter of request. So you should definitely check with the city council members in your community school district and find out what the process is. Make sure that your principals are aware that this funding source exists and that they take advantage of it. There's also participatory budgeting, which some council members participate in, not all of them. This is, again, a capital project, but it's not just for schools. You may be competing against projects in New York City parks. It might be a DOT project. There was a bus time indicator project that was a participatory budgeting process that got selected as a project. So some of the bus stops in Manhattan have these little timeline things, like your next bus is arriving in 9 minutes. So those kinds of projects also get put into the participatory budgeting, but schools can also put a project in. This is a process that starts in fall. So we missed the boat for this cycle, but as a CEC member and Citywide Council members and PTA and SLT members, you should definitely be aware there is a process and pay attention to it. Find out if your City Council member participates in this process, and if your City Council member does, then get involved and put some school improvement projects in there. Now, the projects need to be voted on by people who live in the districts, and young people can also vote in this process. So you can turn out your school community and vote for the project for your school. So really a good way to get some projects off the ground for your school. Borough President also has Rizzo A funding. I think it's earlier than the City Council. That's what Liz told me this afternoon. But keep an eye out for these Borough President funded Rizzo A money. Sometimes Borough Presidents have a particular interest area that they want to focus funding on. A couple of years ago, Gail Brewer wanted to have school community gardens or something like that. So all projects that had to do with gardening or green roof on top of the school buildings were a priority project that she funded. So definitely check with the Borough President's office. Okay, so this is the form the School Construction Authority sends to the CECs and Citywide Councils. So you can see the top 5 projects are here. And then it does actually provide space for all the other projects that you receive. So definitely make sure you fill out the form and list all the projects you received. Some of these are automatically populated, or it's a drop-down menu, so you don't have to manually enter every single piece of information. But hopefully you have an AAA who can do this. But if you don't, one of you will have to fill this out. Let's talk a little bit about capacity projects. So the process for determining capacity needs, meaning how many school seats do we need, hinges upon projections of enrollment. How many students do you think we're going to have in the next 5 years, 10 years? That's the projection. And the inventory of seats. How many school seats do we actually have in the system right now? And that really determines the need for capacity. If the inventory is larger than what we think we're going to have in 5 years, 10 years down the road, then we don't need to build any more new schools. But it's usually the other way around. Projections are made by a consulting firm called the Statistical Forecasting. And the report is called the Enrollment Projections for the New York City Public Schools. Right now, I think we're using the 2018-19 to 2027-28 projection. Actually, there might be a newer one. But these are projections that are periodically updated. It's a fascinating report. You should definitely take a look at it. You can download it from the School Construction Authority website. Inventory of seats is done every year, and it's in the form of a report called the Blue Book. The official name is Enrollment Capacity and Utilization Report, but we call it the Blue Book as a shorthand. This is the report that shows you how many seats every single school building has in New York City public school system. So then capacity need is determined based on the projections and the inventory of seats, and the 5-year capital plan is then prepared for the capacity needs. And that's how they decide how many school buildings they need to build. Okay. This school capacity becomes even more important now because of the class size law that passed in 2022. Class sizes are supposed to be 20 students for K through 3rd grade, 23 students for 4th through 8th grade, and 25 students in high school. For physical education and performing arts classes, you can have up to 40 students in a class. So those are the class sizes according to the new law. We need, clearly, sufficient space for small class size and sufficient budget to hire teachers. So these are the two big levers for meeting the class size mandates. We're not going to talk about sufficient budget because that's a whole different can of worms, and it doesn't exactly relate to the capital plan at the moment, but we are going to talk a little bit about sufficient space. This is what the projection report looks like. It's prepared by the Statistical Forecasting Company, and the current one actually goes through 2030 to 2031. And this is one of the tables that you can find in that report. I'm not going to go into the details, but I'm urging you to take a look at it. There are interesting maps in there, a couple other interesting visuals, and tables like this. You should spend some time looking at it and make sure if it jives with what you know on the ground. If you are in District 6, let's say, and this report projects enrollment decline, in school year 2020-21, there were 13,830 students in District 6, but by 2030-31 school year, this particular projection says you're going to be down to 9,214 students. Does that seem right to you, knowing what you know about your neighborhoods? So you should definitely pay attention to the projections, because the method for projecting is not clear. Yes, it's proprietary information, so they don't necessarily release it. And these projections have been known to be off in some districts. So pay attention to what these numbers are saying about your particular district. And this is the cover of the Blue Book, Enrollment Capacity and Utilization Report. This is the most recent one released, and it is the enrollment figure from the October 31st of each year. That's the enrollment part of the report. Capacity is based on the principal's annual school survey. This report is also available from the DOE school website. Okay, take a look at that. It's different from the building condition assessment survey. This is an annual survey that the principal conducts on her own, and it reports on what every single room is used for. Room 101A is storage, room 102 is kindergarten, room 103 is an art room, that kind of detail. But every single room has a label for its usage in this report. Principals should really be informed about the importance of accurate survey, because the capacity of your building is determined directly by how the principal fills out the survey. So it's really, really important that this is done accurately. And if you have co-located schools, it is one of the principals that fills out the survey, and the other principals, all they have to do is approve it. Now, you can imagine if a principal is super busy with everything else, that principal may just rely on the co-located school principal to fill it out and just approve it without really looking at it. They shouldn't do that. Because if it's not filled out accurately, your school capacity may show available seats when your school's very overcrowded and your class sizes are huge. That could happen. So that's how important this is. Now, the principal's annual school survey data get fed into formulas, and there are different formulas for different grade configurations. So like elementary has a formula, middle school has a formula, K through 8 has a different formula, so on and so forth. So that formula spits out the capacity for the building. So then utilization, which is actually a percentage, is a simple ratio of enrollment divided by capacity. Okay, so that's the Blue Book, and this is what the Blue Book looks like. It has a district and school number, school name, and then over here, enrollment as of October 31st of 2022, right? Because that's the Blue Book we're looking at, and the target capacity. This is the capacity number based on the principal's annual survey conducted by PS15 in District 1. And then utilization is the percentage. That means this school is only at 72% of capacity. The one below, PS20, is at 45% of capacity. Now, again, you should pay attention to these numbers. Do these numbers seem right? Just because these are formulas and in the official report doesn't mean that the data are correct. You should definitely verify. And if something tells you that something is off, let's say that PS20 is at 45% capacity, but kids are sitting in the hallway to do their schoolwork or to do their work, or students with disabilities are doing their therapy in the hallway, there's something wrong there. You have to look into why that is. Because if there's 45% utilization, that means there's plenty of room in that school to be doing everything that they need to do in the classrooms, right? So if there are things happening in the hallway because there's not enough classrooms to do things in the classrooms, then there is something wrong with the formula, and you need to look into that. You should also look at the district summary page of the Blue Book. This is where they tally up all the enrollment figures for elementary, middle, and K through 8, high school, 6 through 12, and all those. And then it tells you the capacity for those grade configurations. Again, these are good numbers to become familiar with and understand that, okay, for District 1, their capacity in elementary and middle schools, but 88% for PSIS, that's K through 8, that's getting pretty close to at capacity, right? Even though it's 88%, that's sort of the sweet spot for schools. It's around 88%, 90%. technically 100% is the right spot, but 100% to me feels crowded. So there's quirkiness in the Blue Book formulas that really isn't quite accurate, in my opinion, that is. So what you should know about the Blue Book. The last formula review was in 2015, and I was on the Blue Book review committee. We never really completely finished the review. So it would be great to be able to review the formula again to make sure the formula is actually accurately reflecting the conditions in the schools in terms of how school buildings used and the capacity of the school buildings. So right now, this is a little too in the weeds. I'm not going to go into it, but suffice to say, every little tweak in the formula for the Blue Book calculation has a significant impact in the capacity, and significant impact in the capacity has a significant impact on the capital plan. Okay, I'm going to skip over the other ones. I could do a whole workshop just on the Blue Book, which maybe we'll do someday. And this is what the capacity section of the capital plan looks like. District 2 is slated to have 2 new schools built in the next so many years. One is slated to be completed by 2032, and the other one is slated to be completed by 2028. So these are pretty long horizons. And then for schools that are, for new schools that don't have a particular site yet, they show up as project 1, project 3, yada, yada, yada. These are sort of a placeholder in the capital plan. We don't know where they're going to go. And again, if you see 78, that means high school. Okay. So for capacity planning, you should become familiar with your school's capacity, your liaison schools, that is. Is the school overcrowded? Do they have enough cluster specialty rooms? Are students with disabilities served in appropriate spaces, or are they being served in hallways? Those are the questions you should ask when you do a school visit. And there are other questions as well. Are your class size really big? How is your space usage? I mean, there are a variety of questions you can ask in terms of school capacity and space usage in the school. Also, district planning comes to CECs and Citywides to present their district plan, right? These are district planning documents that talks about what kind of schools are in your district, what kind of programs are being offered, what the enrollment looks like, and that kind of data workbook. Definitely pay attention to them and look at them carefully. Which schools are overcrowded and which schools have space, supposedly, right? Is there rezoning needed? That's a possibility. It may not always be building a new school just because the school's overcrowded. If another school in the same district has capacity and they are elementary schools with zoning lines, it might be that you have to rezone so that the zone sizes are appropriate for the buildings. There's also class size reports available on New York City Open Data. I would definitely review that to compare it with the Blue Book. Sometimes a school may not be overcrowded, but class sizes are large, right? So you never know how those things play out. Overcrowded schools don't necessarily mean class sizes are large either. So you need to look at all these reports and make sense out of what's happening. Definitely look through the Blue Book and get familiar with what the Blue Book shows you and tells you. And look at the capacity and enrollment figures. Are they really accurate? Do they make sense to you? And are the principals aware of the principal's annual school survey, especially in the co-located schools? Make sure the principals knows that this survey exists and they're actually taking it seriously. Also, pay attention to land use planning. Some neighborhoods in New York City are going through rezoning, like Guanas. They're going to have a huge number of new residential units, and they might have a significant impact on your schools. So if there are zoning changes being proposed, and I'm not talking about the school zoning here, it's the zoning, the city zoning, right? If there's a zoning changes being proposed in your neighborhood, start to pay attention and make sure that they're not massive residential buildings. And if they are massive residential buildings, then you should be thinking about whether you're going to need new school buildings or not. Building relationship with community boards is a great idea for capacity planning because they understand land use, right? That's one of their responsibility, is to think about land use in their community boards. And rezonings go through community boards too. So they can tell you if there is a massive residential development happening in your neighborhood and what the potential impact might be on the school community in your district. Growth in population, those are things you want to work with the community boards to understand. Is the population growing everywhere in your district, or is it just a particular neighborhood? And is the population increase because young people are moving in, or are they families moving in? If it's just a bunch of Gen Zers just moving in, then maybe you don't have to worry about increasing school seats. But if you start seeing a lot of strollers in your neighborhood, you have to start thinking about school capacity. Likewise, declining population, you should keep an eye on as well. You can actually maybe reduce class size to the mandated sizes in the law. And you want to be proactive about how you use existing buildings with capacities. What you don't want is a charter school moving in just because your enrollment declined in your public school and there is excess room or capacity in your school building. Think about bringing in a community-based organization to run a program after school or a dance program or whatever it is. Advocate for a community school if there is capacity in the school building. So think about proactive planning for buildings that have capacity. And think long-term. If you see residential buildings going up today, you have to start thinking about school buildings today because it takes 5 or more years to build a new school. It's a long process. Okay, finally, mandated programs. These are cut and paste from the capital plan directly, but these are legally required programs, and the school construction authority has to do these. But you should also understand that these are the programs that they can't do anything about, right? They have to do these. These are compliance programs. And many of them are good. Asbestos remediation is a good thing. Lead paint removal is also a good thing. Code compliance, important. So these are all important programs, but they're mandated legally. Couple things before we part soon. Best practices. So here is what we found in District 2 when I was on it, and I was on it for 12 plus years. It's good to have a committee that can coordinate this effort. So it doesn't fall on the president or the vice president. If you have a small committee of people really taking charge of contacting the principals and asking for capital projects, that works really well. And if you don't have an AA for your council, I think having a committee is even more important so that you can get this done. Schedule a committee meeting to review the requests, and you can invite the SCA and the Department of Education Division of Facilities people. Sometimes they'd be willing to come to a committee meeting to really review the requests that you have received from your schools, and they can tell you, oh, that is not really a capital project, so don't rank it in the spreadsheet. Or they would say, oh no, that's a really serious problem, let's bump it up. So if you can build a relationship with your SCA liaison and the DOE facilities folks, that is a good thing you should do, and invite them to your committee meetings to review the requests together. Okay. Ranking requests. It's really up to your council how you want to do this. But as a process, if you have an AA should be preparing the spreadsheet, right? She or he should be the one pulling all the information together and plugging it into the spreadsheet. But we really like the process we had in District 2 of ranking projects. We created our own spreadsheet, plugged in all the projects, and then we created columns for all the members, and we ranked them low, mid, high priority. You can do it as number 1, 2, 3, or you can rank it 1 through 5, however you want to do it. We made it a simple ranking process, and then we tallied them, and then we took the top 5. And that's what we put on the SCA top 5 category. We also included a comment letter, and our comment letter usually said we need ADA accessibility everywhere in District 2 old school buildings. Wait, hold on, one more thing. So ranking requests, we prioritized safety and ADA accessibility. If a school requested a capital improvement project that actually compromised the safety or health of the students, we rank those high. For instance, we had a school that said we have asbestos tiles on the floors. Some of them are cracked, some of them are peeling, and that is a health hazard to students, right? Asbestos is lead, and we don't want to expose students to lead in the school buildings. So those projects that had to do with safety or health, we ranked them high priority. There was another request that came in for a school that had a really crappy gym with columns everywhere inside the gym. And those columns needed padding because kids run around and they bump into columns, and the paddings were deteriorated. So the school requested new padding on all the columns, and we ranked those high as well. But as the council, you should come up with what the priorities are, whether it's health or safety or something else. That should be a conversation for your council. And then you rank projects based on those priorities. That is it, folks. Please take a snap photo of that QR code, because this is the way you can give us your feedback. I did a lot of talking tonight. I don't usually like to do it this way, but there's so much material. I just kept talking. So please do that feedback. I will also send you a link to the feedback in the follow-up email tomorrow. And that's the end of the presentation. And if you're feeling generous and if you like what we do, that QR code will take you to the donations page. So please do that as well. We would really appreciate your support. I'm going to stop sharing and open the floor up for anybody with any questions or comments. I see you, Wanda. You want a whole workshop on Blue Book. We'll think about that for sure.
Please, let me get into the camera. Hi. I've been involved with participatory budgeting, RESOA, and among others, pretty much. But I never heard of that Blue Book. Right
Ooh.
now, I am the District 75 representative for CECA, and I'm also the treasurer. And there's only 2 elected members, BP2 and me. So due to the fact that our CEC is having so many complications, this is something that it is, for me, it's extremely important, because right now, tomorrow, I do have a meeting with 2 schools about PB and RESOA. I put in the chat about the RESOA info session for the Bronx that is going to happen with the borough president.
That's
on
great.
December the 13th.
Excellent.
And I'm working with 3 council members right now. I'm trying to get one of the council members, she's not doing participatory this year, but we have a school that is not in my district, but my daughter's school is co-located in it, that has never, let me rephrase that because I cannot say never, but it hasn't had anything in the past 10 years.
Oof.
So yes, and I'm going over there tomorrow. So if you can, I'm gonna share. You guys have my email because I've been attending these webinars.
Yep. You registered too, so we have your email.
If you can share all this information, because I was doing a lot of screenshots because I'm doing other things.
Oh no! We share the presentation. We'll send it to you tomorrow.
Please.
Yep.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome, Amanda.
Hey, it's probably outside the scope of this meeting, and I've asked this a couple times. So we have, once the projects get approved, they go through like the design phase and the planning phase. Once they've been designed and planned, how long does it take to get into the actual construction side of things?
Good question. I guess it depends on the project, the scale of the
Right.
project, right? Yeah, but it is notoriously long. Anything that has to do with city contracting process takes a long time. Yeah, but if it's like a cafeteria upgrade, it shouldn't take long.
Mm.
I think that for a simple project like cafeteria upgrade, I think the longest is the design and the planning phase. And then once the construction starts, it should be a fairly quick process. But if you're doing something like an auditorium upgrade or gymnasium upgrade, it could take longer. I think it really depends on the project.
I know for the two projects I'm thinking of, one for my kids' school, they're getting a sump pump upgrade, which is actually in the budget, but it's for like 2025. The other one is District 23 used to have a pool up until like a few years ago, and then it broke, and then it hasn't been fixed. So we're like, we would really like a pool, and there's a big push to get everyone to learn how to swim. And it's just about to be at the end of the design phase. So I wanted to see what we could take to kind of like push it along and push it higher into the.
So I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to mention the capital plan this year has a new section called school health category that's brand new. It never existed before, and it has $2.something billion set aside for that particular category. And these are athletic field swimming pools and school gardens and cafeteria redesigns and couple other boiler upgrades and couple other health related projects. So there is a new category. But if it's in the design phase, that means that there is money set aside already somewhere in the capital plan, right? Because usually they don't, if they go through the design, that means they have the intention of constructing it. So they should be somewhere money set aside for the construction of the swimming pool or the upgrade of the swimming pool. So there is a class size law meeting at 7 o'clock. I'm going to put the link for you to register. I think you can still register for it. It's in the chat. I highly encourage you to attend because this class size law is under attack. There's a group of people who want to repeal the law. And this is the law that we fought so hard to put on the books. So if you can come to the meeting, that would be great. And 1 minute to spare. I'm going to let you all go. And we will think about a Blue Book training sometime. So stay tuned. Maybe not right away, but we'll definitely put that on the docket for future workshops.